What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another ComicLink price guide for CGC graded comic books. All of these are CGC 9.8s. We got a lot of Star Wars books, but also other books, other big books. And I could talk about the comic book market forever. I love comic books. The only problem is I really don't know anything about them, okay? So if you want to have somebody that really knows what they're talking about, go check out Jerry over at Team CGC 9.8. He's another YouTuber. He's been doing this a lot longer than me. He's got an incredible collection, and he really knows his stuff. So in the video description, I will put a link to a few of his latest videos so you can go check it out. He kind of took a break from making videos, but it's good to have Jerry back. I love Jerry, and I've gotten a lot of really good information from him. He's forgotten more about comic books than I'll ever know, okay? Put it that way. But I wanted to talk about some of the recent sales over at ComicLink because there have been a lot of really nice ones. And again, the prices are soft. It's a really soft market right now, and lots of good deals. And I just thought it would be kind of fun to kind of talk about some of the books that I haven't been able to pick up, but some of them, I did pick up one in this batch. But there are some really good deals out there. Batman books in general are dead in the water. It's really quiet right now. So, especially for some of these modern books where there's a lot of them on the census, now's a really good time to be looking at some of these. So here's Batman 635. This is the first time that you see Jason Todd, who used to be Robin, as the Red Hood, who is, he kind of becomes an enemy after being brainwashed by the Joker. At least that's how it went in the comics and to a certain extent in the Arkham City video game, which I played to death. This is his first appearance comic. It's a great cover and kind of a cartoony kind of style cover to it. Reminds me of Batman Adventures. This one was a 9.8 and it sold for $245. So this one had been going kind of $300 to $350. So now's a good time to look at that one if you're into some of these, secondary modern keys. Here's another one I do have in my collection. This was actually a recommendation from Jerry over at Team CGC 9.8. I had already bought it, but this book has actually held up pretty well. This is Batman number 6. From 2012, the New 52. It's got just an amazing Greg Capullo cover, and this is the first full appearance of the Court of Owls. I am 100% positive, maybe 99.9% positive, that the Batman sequel, the Robert Pattinson Batman, which if you haven't seen that movie, you got to see it. It's an incredible movie, probably the best Batman movie other than The Dark Knight. This book kind of covers the first full appearance of the Court of Owls, which is kind of like a secret society that controls Gotham to a certain extent. And this is a great cover. This is the standard cover A. There is another 1 in 25 ratio variant where Batman's kind of fighting Talon, but I like this cover better personally. I just think it's such a creepy cover. I bought it maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago. I think I paid around $300 for it, somewhere in that ballpark. And it's held up pretty well despite the market. This one sold for $290. Try to aim for that $275 to $300 number if you're looking for this book, because I just think that the Court of Owls are going to have a big presence in the Robert Pattinson Batman sequel, The Batman. So I think now's a good time to pick that up while it's kind of quiet. But I love that book. Next up is another one I want to add. And it's not a key issue, it's a secondary, but it's held up pretty well. It's a pretty iconic cover by Jock. And, it's the Joker, but, this is Detective Comics 880 from 2011. So it's a modern comic. There's a lot of them out there. And I expected this one to kind of drop. I was hoping to pick this one up closer to $300. And everything that sells on eBay is a little bit above that. It dipped down to around $300 for about 2 weeks. And then it bounced right back up. And now it's going for around $400. This one sold for $410. Again, it's a secondary, book. It's really just for the cover, right? So it doesn't have any big first appearances in it, but I absolutely love this cover, and I'd like to pick it up fairly soon. But I wanted to point it out because this is another book that's kind of gone against the trend for secondary keys dropping in value. This one is held up and is consistently selling at $400 or higher. Next up was Daredevil 168. This is the origin and first appearance of Elektra. Obviously a really big key book. And, Elektra I would expect to see again at some point. There's rumors that Jennifer Gardner is going to reprise her role as Elektra at some point. She's obviously up there, getting up there in age a little bit. She's still very attractive, by the way. But I think that, there might be kind of a multiverse aspect to it. Who knows? But this is a big book, though. It's a pretty famous book by Frank Miller. This one did have a little bit of an overwrap on the left-hand side, but it was a 9.8. This one sold for $2,055, which is well down. Now, a perfectly wrapped one sold maybe 2 months ago on ComicLink for closer to $2,900, if memory serves. But this one did sell, and it might have been a newsstand, so I can, don't quote me on that number. But this one was a direct edition, and it did have an overwrap, and it sold for about $2,000. I would aim for a little bit under that, because it's, there's not really much in the way of big kind of hype right now for anything Daredevil related. It seems like all the big Daredevil keys are kind of flat right now. And I would look for a cleaner example without the overwrap on it, but not a bad price, $20.55. I mean, it's a pretty major key, and worth taking a look at. One of my favorites, one in my collection, this is the direct edition of Incredible Hulk 340. This is another book that is kind of hovering. It got down to about this number of 1025. Then it bounced back up to about 1300, and you still see them sell for $1,100 to $1,200 on eBay. So once you factor in, eBay sales taxes and things, it's probably closer to $1,300. This one sold for $10.25, though. It was perfectly wrapped, beautiful example, nice vibrant colors, fairly recently graded with a custom label. So I would aim for that $1,000 number if possible. There were two that sold last month for around $1,100, so this number's down just a little bit, but I thought that was a really great price for a very clean copy of Hulk 340 in the direct edition. Another good deal right now is Infinity Gauntlet #1 in the direct edition. This one sold for $113. I mean, that is cheap. That's the cheapest I've seen for a while. For the longest time, this was going kind of $200 to $250, but $113 for this one. This one was freshly graded as well, nicely wrapped. I didn't see anything wrong with it at all. So that's another kind of secondary key that is worth picking up. In the newsstand, it's a little harder to find. I've been looking for a newsstand just because there's so many of these in the direct on the Census in a 9.8 grade. But in a newsstand, the last sale I saw was a few months ago for around $400 to $450. But this direct edition at $113, it's hard to beat that price. I'm very tempted to buy it at that price, but I'm trying to hold out for a newsstand. Next up, New Mutants 98. I think there were two sales for New Mutants 98 in the direct edition. This one was freshly graded, pretty clean copy. Always look for Domino's foot there to make sure it's not cut off, because some of them do get cut off there, but this one was pretty clean. And that one sold for $12.50. So that price is down. It was kind of $1,400-ish last month. Now it's $12.50. I think, to me personally, I think this is probably a buy at $12.50. I'd pay that price. There's so many of them on the Census, though, and there is a lot of heat right now for Deadpool 3 coming out, that maybe it does drop down to $1,000. I don't know. But to me personally, I'm willing to pay $12.50 for a 9.8 of the direct edition right now. And there was a second copy. That one sold for $13.51. That one did have a little bit of foot cut off right there, as you can see on Domino, but pretty awesome book. I mean, this is actually just one of those books that I'd like to have in my collection, that while there are a lot of them on the Census, it's pretty timeless. I think it'll always be in demand. I just can't see it getting to $1,000, but maybe it will. We'll see. So $13.51 and $12.50 were the two most recent sales on ComicLink for a direct edition of New Mutants 98. Let's dig into some Star Wars books now. Star Wars #1. It did have a little bit of a miswrap, as you can see there. But this one was a 9.8 grade. That one sold for $34.67. So that's down again. There was another one that had a pretty decent wrap, I think. It might have been slightly overwrapped, that sold last month for $3,700. This one sold for $34.67. So this one did have some bleed through, which I talked about in past videos. That the white Star Wars logo does sometimes get bleed through from the interior that had like an advertisement on it in red. So to me, I prefer to pay a little bit more to avoid this bleed through, and to avoid a miswrap. So I think those two factors held that price down just a little bit. I would expect a perfectly wrapped book with very vibrant colors, recently graded like this one was. Without that bleed through, you're probably talking more like the $3,700 number from last month. Next up, Star Wars 16, a secondary key. This one is the first appearance of Valance, the Bounty Hunter. I always like this book. I've got this one in the Whitman's multi-pack with the blank white white box instead of the barcode. This is a 1978 book. This one sold for $231. That one seems to be hovering right around that sales price, $225 to $250. $231, I think, was a very fair price for that one. Star Wars 39. This is the beginning of the Empire Strikes Back adaptation. This one was a 9.8 in the direct edition. That one sold for $145. That is a bargain. That is a bargain of a deal. Now, admittedly, there's no big first appearances, right? It's a secondary book from the Marvel run, the original Marvel run. But $145 is a bargain for that one. That's a price I'd pay all day long. Next up, Star Wars 81. This is the Return of Boba Fett with a beautiful painted cover. This also was a direct edition. That one sold for $229. I mean, around the book of Boba Fett, this was going for $1,000. It was crazy how much this book has dropped. But $229 in the direct. You can probably expect to pay $375 to $400 in the newsstand for Star Wars 81. But that's a tough book to find in a newsstand. You don't see that pop up very often. Great cover, though, and again, a secondary key from the original Marvel run. Let's dig into some Spider-Man keys. We've got both the direct as well as the newsstand for Amazing Spider-Man 238, the first appearance of Hobgoblin. I've got this direct edition as well. Beautiful book. This one has come down just a little bit, $1,617 on this one. This one kind of was going $1,800 to $1,900 last month. This one sold for $1,617. And it was freshly graded, beautiful centering, beautiful colors. Really good deal on that one. I think that's a very fair price to pay right now for that book. Likewise, here was the newsstand for Amazing Spider-Man 238. This was another really good deal, although it did have off-white to white pages, so factor that in. That one sold for $22.11. With white pages, there was one that sold last month for around $2,800 or $2,900 if memory serves, but this one did have off-white to white pages, so factor that in to this price. I think if you can get this one in a newsstand with white pages for $2,200, you're doing really well. I haven't seen it go that low recently, so I would expect to pay a little bit more, probably maybe aim for around $2,500 in the newsstand with white pages. Next up was a newsstand for Amazing Spider-Man 252, the first appearance of the black costume. This is another really nice book. In the newsstand, this one sold for $1,538. I think the one last month was around $1,650. So this one also has come down. So some of these Spider-Man keys that are kind of buy and hold forever type books, now's a pretty good time. It seems like in general, some of the big Spider-Man keys are down. Next up, Ultimate Fallout 4. This one was the variant edition, the 1 in 25 variant cover. And this book continues to drop like a rock. This one sold for $19,250. Maybe a month or two ago, this was going for about $28,000. So it's a huge drop in price. It's really, really come down a lot. I think personally, the floor, the near-term floor, assuming that we don't have any major economic crisis in the U.S., I would aim for $15,000 if you're looking to get this book. I think that's a good number to aim for. Will it get that low? Who knows? Who knows? I don't know. It's just hard to say. It's an expensive book. It's got a very select buyer pool for something like this. Someone who's willing to pay 15 grand or 19 grand for a 2011 book. It's the first appearance of Miles Morales, admittedly, and it's the variant edition, but I could just see this book coming down to $15,000 because there's a lot of things that you can buy that are older and harder to find in a 9.8 grade or a lower grade. Some of these golden age books where you could spend $15,000 and get a no-brainer versus this one where it's a little bit more speculative. So I don't know. I don't know. Me personally, I'm not buying it. I'm not spending that kind of money. But it is an amazing cover, and it's certainly a big key book with Miles Morales' first appearance. The standard cover A in the first print, here that is. This one also continues to come down. And I said a few months ago that my price target was around $1,400. Well, sure enough, it's there right now. This one sold for $1,410. So, last month it was $1,600. This month, $1,410. And is it going to bounce off this price or keep dropping? Who knows? There's a ton of them on the census, but to me, I'm willing to pay $1,400 for this book. So it's probably going to be on my short list for the next 6 months or so if I can find the right auction and I have that kind of money sitting around. It's a lot of money, and I certainly don't have that kind of money sitting around regularly. So that's a big book, but the cover A, Ultimate Fallout 4, first print, sold for $1,410. Next up, The Punisher, limited series number 1. This was the direct edition. You don't see the newsstand for this one very much. You see the newsstand for Wolverine limited series 1. fairly often, but I just don't see the newsstand for this one very often. So this one did sell in an auction for $790 last month. This one was selling for $850 to $875. So this one came down just a little bit at $790. So I thought that was a pretty decent buy on that one. Freshly graded, brand new case style and pretty good centering on it and nice color. So this is a beautiful book. And I think it's a better buy in the direct edition. This book is a better buy versus Wolverine Limited Series #1. And the price reflects that, right? This one sold for $790, while Wolverine #1, Limited Series #1 in the direct edition, there were several sales for this one. This one sold for $487, and this one sold for $512. So, you're gonna be paying a little bit more for Punisher Limited Series #1 in the direct versus Wolverine. But I think that the Wolverine is an easier find. Every single month, there's 3 or 4 or 5 of these in a CGC 9.8 with white pages that come up on ComicLink. So it's just so plentiful that, to me, if I'm going to get this book, I'm going to get it in the newsstand. That one usually goes for around $1,100 in the newsstand. So I went ahead and got Punisher Limited Series #1 in the direct in a 9.8 grade. So I'm excited about that one getting to me. But hopefully I can get Wolverine Limited Series #1 in a newsstand over the next year or so to kind of pair with it. I think it would be a nice book to pair with it. So Wolverine 88, the first fight between Wolverine and Deadpool. This book has come back down to earth despite kind of the hype starting to build for Deadpool 3. And I said it would, right? I had 2 of these in a 9.8, and I sold them for around $600 to $650. Well, this one sold in a direct edition. This is the deluxe edition. There's also a standard edition that's more expensive. But the deluxe edition will say deluxe in the upper left-hand corner there. It's a great cover. It's a black cover, black and blue. The cover art is by Adam Kubert, and I love this book. I mean, don't get me wrong, but when it hit $650, I sold both of my copies, but now it's back down to $312. I'd be a buyer right now at that price point. $300 to $325 in that ballpark is a good time to buy this book. So be on the lookout for that. On eBay, they tend to go for $400 to $450 even in auction. So maybe in a stealth auction on ComicLink or on My Comic Shop, you can find it for closer to $300. But that's a number I'd be willing to pay all day long for that book. I don't have it now, but I hope to add it back to my collection at that price point. Now, speaking of first battles, this is the first meeting between the Punisher and Deadpool. And I'm a little bit confused as to why this book sells for so much cheaper versus Wolverine 88. So Wolverine 88 is the first meeting between Deadpool and Wolverine. The first meeting between Deadpool and Punisher is Deadpool #54 from 2001. Now, admittedly, I don't like the cover nearly as much. This cover is not nearly as good, in my opinion. I don't like the way they did Punisher. It just looks a little, I don't know. It doesn't speak to me as good comic art relative to Wolverine 88. So that might be part of it. But there's a lot fewer of these on the census than Wolverine 88. And this one sold for $135. So to me, that's a good buy. I would buy this book at that price point, that $125 to $150 price point for Deadpool #54, the first meeting between Punisher and Deadpool. That to me is a screaming buy right now, even despite the kind of less than enthusiastic feeling I have about the art. And then finally, I've got X-Men 133. This is the first solo story for Wolverine, and it's also his first solo cover. So this is a great looking book, a very desirable book. This one was the direct edition. This is from May of 1980. John Byrne cover. I mean, you can't go wrong with this book. This is a big key book. And last month they were selling for around $1,100 to $1,200. This month, this one sold for $1,020, which I thought was a great deal. Freshly graded, nicely centered, perfect colors. That was a really good buy. So that's another one that's kind of on my list, because I think if you can get it around that $1,000 price point, to me, that's a good buy and a book that's going to hold its value long term. It's just one of those books that it's a no-brainer to add to your collection, in my opinion. So be on the lookout for that one in future auctions for, try to get it for around $1,000. X-Men 133 from 1980. Anyway, that's all I really had for this video. Thanks as always for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back soon.